of course, having the opportunity to come to the United States is a transformative thing because you're actually getting to see things with your own eyes. They have all these misconceptions, and then they see that things are different. When I was in the administration before, people said, oh, people don't want to come to the United States because they don't like some of the rhetoric. And I said, well, I go around the world and I speak to students all around the world, and they have a lot of the same concerns as American students. They want to go to school. They want to get their degree. What's the biggest issue? Oftentimes it's cost.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Asia Forward, where we explore forward-thinking ideas on U.S. and Southeast Asia. I'm Ledy Simarmata. Today, we'll be talking about education, and especially how education connects people between the United States and Southeast Asia. For many students from Southeast Asia, the U.S. has long been seen as one of the top places to pursue higher education. But education is so much more than a degree. It can build careers and networks, as well as create relationships with lasting impact. I'm one of the examples of that, actually. I'm an alumni of McCain Global Leaders program in 2020 here in the U.S. We're taping this episode in Washington, D.C., where many international education policies and exchanges are initiated. Joining me today is Marie Royce, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Educational and Cultural Affairs from 2018 to 2021. Marie, welcome to Asia Forward.
Thank you very much for having me.
How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
How's your day so far?
Everything's great, thank you.
Good to know. So I want to start this conversation by looking back to your time in the State Department. Any highlights that you want to share that you still remember until today?
Well, I have a lot of great
Tell me.
programs. So when I think of Southeast Asia, I traveled to several countries. One of the things I did was I was one of the keynote speakers for the Waisili program.
Oh,
the young
that's a famous
Southeastern leaders.
Yeah.
They're age 18 to 25. I went to Phuket, Thailand, and it was wonderful. I also traveled to Burma. I met with many young people there. And we have what we call American spaces around the world.
Right.
And interestingly enough, when I look at the numbers of what we've had a few increases, we've actually have an increase in students from Burma, which is pretty great to know as far as today. I went out to Indonesia. And
My home country?
Yes.
Do you like that?
It was wonderful. I had an opportunity to go to the Humphrey anniversary. And Humphrey is a 10-week program, which is kind of falls under Fulbright.
Humphrey Fellowship, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's a 10-week program, and the students were sharing their projects and presenting to us, and it was incredible. So that's just a few examples, but I had a great experience. And another exciting thing I want to share is that during COVID pandemic, I launched in the region, Southeast Asia, a program that I actually created in 2019. It was called the Academy for Women Entrepreneurs Program. And why is that important is that we created a program, and I signed an MOU with Michael Crow, the president of Arizona
ASU?
State. Thunderbird Global School of Management. And Freeport-McMoRan, which you're probably very familiar with.
I am very familiar with Freeport-McMoRan. Yes.
They actually created an online program called Dream Builder.
Yeah.
And it's a software program.
Yes.
And it's free to anyone that wants to use it. You can have it in Spanish or you can have it in English. And it's either 12 weeks or 13 weeks. But how exciting would it be for you to just have me give you some software? Not that exciting. So what we did was we actually created a whole program around it where you apply at the embassy, you get selected, any age, doesn't matter, but you want to be a woman entrepreneur. Again, it's called Academy for Women Entrepreneurs. You go in a cohort of about 40 people, and then you have a trainer. So then you're actually learning how to do a business plan, how to do a marketing plan, how to raise capital every week. And then there's the ambassadors involved in the graduation at the end. We started back in 2019 with a test of 26 countries, Africa, South America. And then when I left, we were up to 80 countries, which included several in the region of Southeast Asia. And now we have over 100 countries that are part of it and 25,000 women trained.
Wow.
So I bring that up because that's something I'm very proud of.
Right.
Because it still exists today. And lastly, we also have what we call Bridge USA.
Bridge USA.
Which I actually rebranded during my time. And that was, people would call it the J1 program.
Right.
But this is the interns and the teachers and the scholars and the researchers.
When I was a McCain Fellow, I came with J1.
Oh,
I'm familiar with that, yes.
Oh, that's good. You know, we created a tagline, which was connecting global leaders and making global impact. And I think that you're an example of that global impact.
Probably, yep.
So anyway, but there are a lot of great programs. Those are just a few.
Yeah. If we look at the statistics, the U.S. still number one place, top place. When you ask prospective students, which country do you want to pursue higher education, the U.S. will be there at the top of their mind.
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
Well, one of the reasons I think it's, academic freedom at the universities. Also, it's a really great value for your dollar. We also have a large capacity, over 4,000 students. And why is that important? Because you can actually do so many different majors. And then also I created a program with my team to really promote the community college system, for associate's degrees. So the nice part is you can come to the United States, live in 2 different parts of the U.S., improve your English skills, reduce your cost, and those units transfer over to the university. So that is something that really is wonderful that you can do here. And again, we also have incredible STEM programs. And many students are very interested in STEM, business, and I think 53% overall are actually studying in the area of STEM.
The area of STEM.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you see there is a growing competition?
Well, there's always going to be growing competition, and there's been competition by many countries because they also understand that when a student comes to the country, they also spend money. There's also an economic impact. But even with all that, the United States still remains the number 1 destination in the world. I brought a report here today, which actually documents everything I'm saying. And this is called the Open Doors report.
Yeah.
And it's been published for over 75 years. IIE, which is an area of education, talks to 3,000 universities, and they break down the numbers. So again, over record numbers, over a million, 1.2 in the region for Southeast Asia. It's between 7-8% increase as far as students coming from Southeast Asia to the United States. So there's competition, but the United States still
the top.
Still the top.
Yeah, because studying is not just getting a degree, right? It's also the environment that they're going to live in, living environment, studying environment. And that's what you think also the U.S. has a differentiation compared to...
Well, you made a really good point, and you just brought something up, because I used to teach at a university, full-time faculty, and we had it was called Learn by Doing. A lot of the education in Southeast Asia is more rote, or in Asia in general, but we had programs where you actually do everything hands-on. So if you have actually a hotel, a hospitality, you're actually inside the hotel. The restaurant, you're actually learning how to do menu planning, procurement, mise en place, everything that has to do with food prep, buying. This goes back to learning by doing. And also, you're not just watching the professor teach, you're also doing it. And I used to also be in charge of the internships for sophomore and junior and then senior project. So students would actually go in and work, and then I'd have them do a report that they could show when they were interviewing of things they were doing at all these locations, which of course proves that they actually are developing skills. Right. And I will tell you one other thing I wanted to share is that the United States doesn't just promote students coming here. We also promote students going out. Yeah. That's called mobility. And there are countries that have really done a great job. And one of the things that, even the countries in the region, they have more opportunities to promote and maybe have some classes available in, let's say, English. Well, of course, that's for many do speak English. you could offer programs so the students here in the U.S. will get more exposure, and they'll do these, let's say, semesters abroad or quarters abroad. For example, Italy is an example of a country that's number one, I believe, right now, of students going overseas. Spain's a very high one, but they actually really promote that mobility. And of course, you can imagine how the students feel when they've had that experience overseas. There was a program called Gilman, which I just love that program. It was for students that couldn't afford an overseas opportunity. And there was also for veterans. And the United States paid for them to go and have a quarter abroad.
So if we focus on U.S. Southeast Asia now, how do you see education exchange has now shaped or improved the understanding between the two regions? What's your view on that?
I think it's greatly improved their understanding. All these flagship programs have gone on for many years. There's also the alumni network that continues. So it's not just the program itself, it's an incredible network of people that stay connected. So I would say it continues to do very well. And I would ask you, are you actually in any kind of alumni network?
I am, yes.
Okay.
Weekend Global Leaders has an alumni network, and there are many alumni from different countries in that network, and yes, it's a lasting relationship. It is, yeah.
Well, I would just say I personally, I'm an alum of a program called the American Council of Young Political Leaders, and this is for young leaders aged 25 to 40, and they just had their 60th anniversary, and I just went to that. And anyway, I thought it was great to see all these people. We all got to go on exchanges, but we also stay connected. So this is the thing that you're talking about is when you are part of these programs, you kind of have a lifetime opportunity to stay connected and help other young leaders or other people from the region.
Yeah. We now also see U.S. education presence, I would say presence or programs in Southeast Asia, in Southeast Asian universities, or they have actually built campus in Southeast Asia, in Vietnam, in Singapore, in Indonesia. What's your view on that types of initiative?
Well, I think it's a very positive thing. I met with Fulbright Vietnam when I was in Vietnam, and they educate a number of students. And then now Georgetown's also in the region.
Also in Jakarta too, recently?
Yeah. Yes. Now, I think that, of course, having the opportunity to come to the United States is a transformative thing because you're actually getting to see things with your own eyes. I think many people, say it's their life before the exchange or my life before and after they come to the United States to go to school. They have all these misconceptions, and then they see that things are different. For example, NBC did an interview when I was there on Fulbright, and I brought 3 students with me, and one of the students was Muslim from Afghanistan. And they asked, well, is it very hard for you here? Are people not tolerating you? And he says, no, I'm not seeing that at all. I'm studying to be a doctor. And I'm finding the exact opposite. I'm very active in the community. I'm not seeing any bias. And they were kind of surprised by that. But one of the things is that when people actually come and experience it themselves, and that's one of the things that coming to the United States does. But the next best thing, of course, is to go to the U.S. school that's in their country, like Georgetown. I'm an MBA from Georgetown, as an example. I also went in the Middle East, and I saw a Georgetown campus there. And what I saw was the flags of all these different countries. So they're very, very robust as far as diverse student bodies. You get to learn much more about kind of more of a academia from a U.S. perspective. They utilize the Socratic method where they're asking you questions. How do you think? And the other thing I think about, in my opinion, is that for our U.S. schools, I think that you learn 50% from the professors and the 50% from your other colleagues in class. We really try to promote people being on teams together, participating in the classroom, doing projects, let's say field trips. And those are very positive. And I wouldn't imagine that going away if a Georgetown's overseas, for example.
Do you think that this collaboration between American institutions going to Southeast Asian countries, have a presence there, can actually also contribute to the local education system, local higher education system?
Yes.
In what way you think that it can?
Well,
actually,
I think, I want to just share with you, I watched your other podcasts.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed them.
Thank you.
I thought it was really interesting. I'm a big pro-business person and very big on small business. Yeah. For example, Indonesia's economy is largely led by small business.
Yes.
A lot of the people are actually technically astute, which is very good. And what I was hearing from the podcast was about AI.
Yeah, one of the aspects, yes.
Except for the fact that there's a lot of opportunity for Americans to really work with these. Yes. And there's also a lot of young people.
Yes.
But people aren't waiting for, for example, if you don't have a job, you create a job. And it's really a great thing. So that type of mindset, is really good because it's open-minded, and it also shows that how do I explain this best? It's not an easy market sometimes to penetrate, like Undersecretary Lavin was talking about, right? But it's a little bit more complex.
Yeah. Southeast Asia. Yeah.
Right. So if you're actually working with these people and going through with education, I think there's a way to kind of make that bridge to try to help with some of the things that are opportunities. For example, how do you scale your business in a more of a complex environment? How can you use AI to help your SME? So I just think that a lot of the schools will, I think, only enhance some of the great things that the individuals are doing in those countries, and then also be bridge builders from the U.S. to the region.
Do you think that, I know you're no longer with State Department, but if we look at the development today, do you think education still plays as one of the top aspect or one of the top ways to maintain relationship specifically between the two regions? Is it still seen as strategic way to shape perceptions towards the United States?
Well, I think the answer is the numbers, because this report is accurate and it does capture all the data. So the fact that I actually went through and I thought I'd just throw a couple numbers out here. So Southeast Asia, and then this is the most recent report, and these Open Door reports come out during Education Week, which is in November. Burma went up by 16%, Cambodia up by 21%. Indonesia dipped slightly, but in the area of graduate degrees, it went up by 8%. Laos went up by 9%. Philippines went up by 12%. Timor-Leste by 62%. And Vietnam went up by 16%. So that's a good example. Total of 57,000 students. So that's, these are the numbers. So I'm happy. It makes me really pleased to know that the numbers continue to grow.
So Marie, I would like to ask you this. There's a visa ban took place in 2025 to several countries, including several countries in Southeast Asia. How do you view that may impact educational exchanges between Southeast Asia and United States?
Well, as we were discussing earlier, the report is pretty recent. It was from November 2025. As far as that the numbers are right this minute, I'm not aware. But there's always going to be some impact on that for some different countries. But the data that I have is the most recent information from the 3,000 universities that are contributing to the study for the Open Doors report.
So, because it has happened before, and it did not impact much regarding numbers. So you're saying that most likely it also will not impact much the numbers this time too.
That's right, because even though we've had the visa ban in the past, we've also had the highest numbers at that time. Whereas when I went back to 2019, for example, we had record numbers. So the bans weren't actually impacting overall the numbers. So, I will just say this is as accurate as we can get with the data, but typically it hasn't had much of an impact.
How do you feel about visa ban in general? Are you able to share that? How do you feel about it? I mean, as somebody who work hard to bridge this programs within the two regions, how do you feel about visa ban?
Well, overall, I think that if there's going to be a visa ban, there's probably good information that I'm not privy to. When you have a position in the government, you actually have a clearance, and there's everybody has different information. There are countries that I've worked with that also lost the Fulbright program, for example, and we got them back on. But one of them was one country had what we call overstays. Overstays when people come and they do not go back.
That happened a lot, yeah.
I used to look at a lot of that data. There are, the United States is not very pleased if their students are not returning at high percentages.
Last year, particularly, we saw some headlines about students in the United States participating in public protests or campus activities, and they're met with law enforcement.
Yeah.
And then some of them then have to deal with their visa being revoked or being in the limbo, about their status. And these are headlines in newspapers or online news that can be seen all over the world.
Sure.
How do you see that as a factor in shaping the perception of prospective students when they think of the U.S. as a destination to pursue higher education?
Well, it's a great thing that you brought up because a lot of times those headlines, people think, oh, is this exactly what's really happening here? And those headlines get a lot of attention. We had different headlines that when I did my position that got a lot of attention. But I think a lot of the students have, I would say, critical thinking skills. And then when they read the headlines, they're like, okay, I think that's not really impacting their interest in wanting to come to school here because the numbers are still consistently high.
It's not actually, it doesn't affect that much.
Well, for example, when I was in the administration before, people said, oh, people don't want to come to the United States because they don't like some of the rhetoric. And I said, well, I go around the world and I speak to students all around the world, and they have a lot of the same concerns as American students. They want to go to school. They want to get their degree. What's the biggest issue? Oftentimes it's cost. And so consequently, that's why we promoted the 2+2. And it really made a big difference. It's kept our numbers up to record numbers.
So still the main concern is, how do I afford that? How can I afford the education compared to the politics? Would you say that that's actually the...
Well, the value of the United States education for the over 4,000 schools that we have here in the U.S. and the fact that we have some of the top... how do I say it? Educational majors that you can take, top in STEM, and it's value for your money, and it's globally known and recognized.
Reputation-wise, yes.
And people, come back and they get jobs. People know that. There are other countries, there are some big countries in the Asia region that try to promote their country, but their reputation is not anything close to the United States. I went to some of the Asian countries where students actually got scholarships to that country, and they really said that the value of what they're getting is nothing close to what they would get in the United States. And students know that.
Yeah. Well, friends, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. If you want to follow all of our episodes, you can find the link here. I want to follow up with U.S. universities now that are offering Southeast Asian programs. So earlier we talked about American presence in Southeast Asia, and now talking about Southeast Asian programs in American universities. Based on what I saw, safe to say there's more than dozens colleges, universities offering the programs, different format, probably. What does this sign to you? Is it a sign that there is a growing need to understand, for Americans to understand Southeast Asia?
I think it's a big growing need, my opinion. I mean, I even learned some things on your podcast, which was isn't it the fifth largest economy in the world?
Yeah. It'll be the fourth soon.
And the fourth soon.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if people are not looking at the market, that is not very smart from an economic standpoint. It's to say that this market is incredibly valuable. They should be in it.
Speaking from your capacity, would you encourage more American universities to offer Southeast Asian studies or Southeast Asian programs?
I do think that would be a good thing.
Why?
I think it would be good for helping understanding the region, because I don't think everybody does understand the region.
Okay. Can you elaborate more on that part? Like, not everybody understand. Is it like, because I felt that there is a, I would say, I'm not saying low, but there is a quite not much narrative.
Well, as an example, when I went to Indonesia in a previous time as a civilian businesswoman, a friend of mine who was the former ambassador of Indonesia's wife introduced me to several female entrepreneurs in Jakarta. I was so, I should say, almost surprised how incredibly sophisticated they were. These women were not small businesses. These were women that are incredibly sophisticated. I think people don't understand how the level of sophistication with a lot of the people. And, and then they're known, like on the example of Thailand, the Thai hospitality and the training. I mean, you can go through each of these countries. And when you go to the airports, I went as a businesswoman to Malaysia, to Kuala Lumpur, and I remember flying in, taking the train on my own, navigating everything. It's not a difficult environment. It's a environment that lends itself to being able to do business. I think it's really a positive environment.
Can I ask you, again, looking back to when you were in the State Department, because this conversation about measuring the success about educational exchange program, a lot of it is very qualitative, isn't it?
Qualitative? Well,
there is a quantitative aspect of that, which is numbers.
Right.
How many people going there? How many people coming here? And then there's a lot of the impact is quite qualitative. So when you were in State Department, how do you measure that this is a successful program? Let's say, take example of program U.S. and Southeast Asian country. Like, that's a successful program. We should continue that. Like, how do you make that? How did you make that decision?
Well, that's a great question. I probably was one of the most known for measuring because I have a business background. And what happened when I first came in my position, I was asked to run my bureau like a business. And in business, we have what we call key performance indicators.
Right.
And what we had inside the bureau was a team of people that did measurements. And, I was probably the first person that was incredibly excited about this. And then I said, well, let's try to figure out when we have a program, we should have goals. We should actually measure outcomes and quantify. And we also should audit programs to make sure they're performing. So that's actually one of the things. From an overall perspective, there's also an economic impact. That means that when people come to the United States to actually study, they actually spend money. They actually create jobs. So we measured everything. And, I think that's incredibly important. So you have to figure out a way to do that.
Okay. What will be the advice that you would give today for prospective students in Southeast Asia right now watching this podcast from their desk, from their bedroom, wherever they are, who's thinking about going to the U.S. to pursue higher education? Well, advice from Marie Royce.
Well, first of all, I want to say the United States wants you to come. We warmly welcome you. We also offer educational advising for free And you can go to your embassy or learn about it. It's called EdUSA. There's 463 offices around the world, and I got to see many in your region and actually talk to students that got to learn. I mean, sometimes students didn't have anyone in their family that ever went to college before, and they went in and they talked to the advisors, and they learned all about the opportunities to come to the United States to study. So I'm saying the resources are there to help you learn. We also have community colleges to reduce your costs. We have almost every kind of major you could possibly ask for. We have the capacity. There's over 4,000 schools. Also, I'm very well traveled in the United States. I've been all 50 states. We don't always have enough people here that can meet all the job needs that we have for the future. And, a lot of the people from Southeast Asia are studying in STEM, and they can fill some of these positions. And some of these students actually take advantage of what they call occupational practical training, where they actually go into companies and they actually use those skills that they learned as, let's say, for their master's degree, and then they get to put it into practice. And the students actually are really contributing to those companies, and they actually, a lot of them are real big on innovation. So, we want that talent in the United States.
Yeah, and given that these students, years later, decades later, will become leaders.
That's right.
In different sectors in their country. And do you think that the other countries who are competing with the U.S. to promote their countries as a destination for higher education, do you think that this is a competition also, that they're also trying to recruit these students as future talents that can be leaders, after they graduate? Do you see that's the focus now when they are trying to recruit?
Well, some of those students end up working in the United States afterwards, obviously. Some actually go back, but and then some, might have an opportunity to actually create businesses with Americans back in their country, where it's like a joint project. There are countries I know from Asia, they have really focused on trying to think of ways to develop more ties with the United States, and having those economic ties are incredibly powerful. You can look at like Silicon Valley as an example. All those companies started as little teeny companies.
And now they become...
And they're big companies now. And I can see that, the region is, well, we know they're producing many, many companies. And some of those can grow much bigger. And I think that also develop even stronger ties to the United States.
Oh, that's a strong point, the economic ties. Then the last question, this is a question we always ask to our guests. This is Asia Forward Thinking question. So thinking about 5-10 years from now, how would you want to see the educational exchange develop between U.S. and Southeast Asia? What is your hope?
Well, I'd like to see, first of all, when I look country by country, I would like, one of my things is I'd love to see Indonesia go from number 23 to one of the highest. I'd love it to be number 1, 2, or 3. Vietnam is right up there.
Oh, yes, yeah. I think they're still number 1 from Southeast Asia, right?
That's right. Yeah. Vietnam is number 1 from Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Number 2 is Indonesia. Number 3.
And then Thailand?
Thailand.
Probably, yeah.
That's right. But I'd like to see all these countries grow. And what I'd like to see, for example, in Indonesia, is more people to know about the opportunities for the master's degree opportunity, because the government feels very strongly about the opportunity to go to school and get your master's degree in the United States, and they've created that fund. The fund is actually underutilized. And I'd love to see more people take advantage of that or participate. And the government wants it to happen. It would be wonderful. But I really think there's a tremendous opportunity. I mean, you look at the size of many of these countries. I mean, as an example, Philippines, right up there in size. We'd love to get more. When I was looking at the numbers, you can see that the Philippines has grown, as I said, as 12% growth as an example. But I could see that it could get even higher.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Marie. Thank you
You're welcome.
very much for sharing with us in Asia Forward. Hope to see you again.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me today. This is a very important subject.
It is.
Yeah, thank you.
You very much.
You're welcome.
And thank you, friends, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Please subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Full episodes are also available on Spotify. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok for more conversations on forward-thinking ideas on U.S. Southeast Asia. I'm Ledy Simarmata in Washington, D.C. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.